Good morning, guys. This is a video I've been wanting to do for some time now. Today we're going to discuss Model 3 aerodynamics. Alright, aerodynamics are kind of a fascinating subject, and I don't pretend to know all there is about the Model 3 or about aerodynamics, but I understand enough to give you guys a basic overview of what to consider and what Tesla has done with this car. I have a background in radio-controlled helicopters, designing, manufacturing, and modifying them, and in high-speed RC cars from years ago. And also, I have a Ford C-Max hybrid as a fourth car, spare car. My oldest son has been commandeering that for a couple of months, but I did a lot of aerodynamic modifications to that car and learned what worked and what didn't work, and I frequent an online discussion forum called Eco-Modder, where people modify their cars for fuel economy, aerodynamics, and that, and I learned a lot on that site. So let's get into it here with the Model 3. Now, the Model 3 is known to have among the lowest coefficient of drag of any car on the market, and one of the lowest coefficients of drag of any car ever produced. If I remember correctly, it's 0.23. Now, Tesla had initially stated that their target for the Model 3 was 0.21 and possibly even 0.20. However, if I remember correctly, it's 0.23 is what it ended up being. Please correct me in the comments below if I'm wrong on that. Now, a bunch of things that people may know about aerodynamics. One is that a slippery surface is important. Now, slippery is that's sort of a relative term. Basically, you want to have the fewest obstructions on the body as possible, and those obstructions that you have, such as you'll notice this autopilot camera pod here, it's shaped in such a way that it is larger in the front and tapers toward the rear, sort of like a raindrop. That is very much like an airplane wing. You definitely want to have more taper as you go toward the rear of an object. Very important. There are very few protrusions on the car. One obvious item is the flush door handles. And you wouldn't think that that makes a big deal, but it does. It's not so much that protruding handles create a lot of drag, but what they do is they disturb the air. Anytime you disturb air and cause it to swirl, that swirling air, those eddies, that creates drag. So you want to have an undisturbed body shape to allow the airflow over the body in a smooth way. Now, the mirrors, right now they're in their folded in position because the car is locked, but the mirrors are small. The mounting arm is an aerodynamic blade similar to an airplane wing. Side mirrors are a regulation, at least here in the States. I know Tesla had looked into just using cameras inside the car to eliminate the mirrors and smooth out the airflow over the body, but wasn't something at least that the US government would allow at the time. Now, overall, the body shape is very clean. Little details. The windshield wipers are tucked down below the surface of the hood. So if you look across this area, you'll notice that the windshield wipers are flush. So the air skips off of the hood, over the top of the windshield wipers and up along the windshield. Nice little detail that is overlooked by many people. When air hits the body of a car, it accelerates. Anytime you pull an object through the air hits the nose of the object and breaks to the side, over the top, and underneath it. And that braking effect, it forces the air to accelerate over the surface of that object. I don't remember the exact numbers, but it's somewhere around double. So if a car is going 60 miles an hour, the air going over the surface of the car is going to accelerate to roughly double that speed, maybe 120, as it goes around the car, because you are forcing the air to move out of the way of the car and then fill the void behind it, and that accelerates the speed of the air. So no matter how perfect you make the shape of an object, there's still going to be drag because you are accelerating air around the body and then decelerating it behind the car once again. So very important to keep in mind. Now, a blunt nose is actually better if it's got a slight curve to it than a flat nose. Most people know that, obviously, but what they don't realize is you don't really want a pointy nose on a vehicle. For one thing, aesthetics, but also if you look at the shape of an airplane wing or just a falling raindrop, they are blunt at the nose and then tapered at the rear. So I've heard people say, well, they should make the nose more pointy on the Model 3. There are some benefits to that kind of thing, but generally speaking, a blunt nose is fine, assuming it's rounded. Now, this ridge here, a lot of people assume that that is a style line. Well, it is and it isn't. What it does, one of the things it does, is it forces the air, much of the air, to stay down rather than go over the top of the car. If you force too much air over the top of the car, you can create some lift in the car. If you keep the air down low and shove it around the sides, you'll reduce how much lift is at the nose. It gives better high-speed stability. But you've got this section here that will funnel air towards the sides of the car, and then you've got this open mouth at the bottom. Now, the open mouth here, that's for funneling air into the heat exchangers, the radiators, to cool the inverter, for the air conditioning condenser and such. So this opening is required. However, you want to minimize how much opening size you've got on the nose of a car, because the more air you take in, the more it acts almost like a parachute. It'll capture that air and slow the vehicle down. So this is a trick that we did, especially with hybrid cars that didn't need a large radiator to keep cool because the engine barely ran on a hybrid. You would block off the grill most of the way and leave a small opening to allow some air to get to the radiator, and you would just monitor the engine temperature to make sure you haven't overdone it. But blocking a radiator is one of the, or a grill at the nose of a car, is one of the surest ways to improve the aerodynamics of a vehicle. So what Tesla has done, and I'm sure you can't see it, it's too dark up in there, but inside this grill here at the nose, there are shutters that open and close to allow more or less air through the radiators. When they close, air will pile up in this area and mostly go around the sides. And when they open, it draws air in to cool off the air conditioning condenser and the battery pack heat exchanger. And but that, as it cools, it also slows the car down a little bit, creates drag. So those close off when not needed. Very important. And the underside of the car is probably the most important part of the shape of a vehicle, primarily because the air compresses under the car and is dragged along. It's forced between the bottom of the car and the ground. So I've got a short video of the underside of the car from back when it was lowered at the shop, and I'll put that video here. All right, guys, so we've got the car up on the lift, and you can see the underside flat pretty much the entire way. So you can see here small aerodynamic little ramps to kick the air down and out of the way of the front wheels. So I'll go around and show the other one here. Kind of interesting point of interest under here is the suspension arms for the rear actually have aerodynamic covers. When the car is sitting with weight on it, those covers will be flush with the rest of the floor to just to smooth out the airflow. But here's the sort of rear diffuser to smoothly take the air from the underside of the car and exit. So there's the underside. Now, very interesting detail. Well, before I get to that, I want to address just a couple simple things like the headlights themselves, even the hood emblem. the more flush anything is to the body, the less it's going to disturb the airflow. So, and I know many modern headlights do this, but Tesla seems to have taken it to the extreme with how flush the headlight lenses are. Very, very nice. They also continue up the body line. Part of that is federal mandate to make the headlights high enough to meet the federal regulations, but also it does provide a smooth flow of air going over the car. Same with the side lights. But now this is an interesting detail. You've got this channel and this slot here. That's designed to channel air into this slot. Now that's not a brake cooling slot. I've heard people assume that that's the case. What that is it takes in air and expels it out this slot right there. Now as you take air in the nose and expel it through that slot, it compresses that air and changes its shape until it's a flat sheet of air to blow across the wheels, and that will smooth out the turbulence caused by the wheels along the sides of the car. Now, for those of you that don't know, these are aftermarket wheels. I'll put a link in at the end of the video that you can click on, and that shows the process of me installing these wheels. These are not aerodynamic wheels. This flat blade spoke design is not aerodynamic, so I have lost some efficiency in aerodynamics and rolling resistance. But the stock wheels that I had chosen from Tesla are smaller diameter wheels, and they have an aerodynamic hubcap or wheel cover, and those reduce turbulence from the wheels along the sides of the car. So I knowingly adversely affected the aerodynamics by installing these wheels. I still have the original wheels, and for the winter I will be installing them, and I'll be doing some testing on that both in hot and cold weather, but I just wanted to address the wheels since they're seen in this video. Another aspect of this aerodynamics of the car is you want to minimize the wheel gap. Wheel gap gives an area for air to get trapped, so you want to minimize that gap, and Tesla has done a wonderful job. In fact, it's a pretty rare thing to see a wheel arch go beyond vertical and begin to hook back down, and yet these do that slightly. The wheel arches actually hook back down, and that's to close off that area, this gap, as much as possible. And we even see it at the rear here, that it's very tight at the rear. Now you can cut that open or even radius this area in, and that improves aero just a little bit, but it looks kind of odd. The original Honda Insight hybrid that car was a pioneering car in aerodynamics, and that had a radiused area here, but again, for aesthetic purposes, I think they didn't do it. Now I lowered this car. It's been lowered an inch, and that lowering both closes off the wheel arch gap a little bit and reduces how much air is going underneath the car. So that does help with my aerodynamics enough to offset at least a portion of adding the wheels, portion of the efficiency that was lost. Now the underside of the car in the video, if you look closely, you'll notice these little ramps here. What those are, let's see if I can get a better view of that. There we go. These little ramps here take the air from the nose, under the nose of the car, and kick it down to try and get it around the tires, because air hitting the face of tread will slow the car down as well. And they're also located in front of the rear tires right here. So you've got this curved area that scoops air down and breaks it around to minimize how much air is hitting the face of the tread on the rear tires. So now there's a neat detail on the front of the car that I have yet to hear anybody address at all, and that is, if you look up under the wheel well, you'll see that little bit of light coming out. What that is, jacking up the car would give a better view of that, but that little bit of light right there, what that is there's a port that about that large in diameter that goes from the wheel well up and escapes out this area here under the windshield. Now, on most cars, there's a rain drain that runs, there's a gutter that takes rainwater and runs it down and drips it through the wheel well. And on this car, that port is huge. And I was wondering if that could be what I'm thinking it is. And now I don't have anyone that has confirmed this for me, but that I believe that port serves a twofold purpose. One is to allow rain to, when the car is stationary, to have a place to exit. But number two, that port, I believe, because of its size, is to allow high pressure air from the front wheel wells to escape. Now, many supercars, Ferraris and Aston Martins and that, will have vents right here in the top of the fender, and those vents allow high pressure air out of the wheel well and exit down the car. But there's problems with that. It's expensive to produce. But it is best to vent that high pressure air out of the wheel wells if possible. And that high pressure air is built up primarily from the rotation of the tire acting almost like a fan and blowing air outward, and it packs up inside the wheel well. When you see a car driving down the road in the rain, you'll notice a huge amount of mist blowing out of the wheel well from most cars, and that's because of the high pressure in the wheel well. Now, also, as a side note, you'll notice that at times if you watch cars driving down the expressway, you'll see rainwater coming off the front tires and actually slamming into the face of the tread on the rear tires, and that's what those little ramps would help avoid, is to have air and water hitting the face of the tread and instead breaks it away. Anyway, back to this vent. That vent, I believe that is to take the high pressure air in the wheel well and vent it to what is otherwise a very low pressure area, which is right here. This area of the car tends to be very low pressure. A partial vacuum forms here, and yet there's pressure in the wheel wells. So that vent would allow high pressure air from inside the wheel well to vent into a low pressure area at the base of the windshield. So let's move around to the back. At the nose of a car, as I mentioned before, it's best that it be blunt to allow the airflow to smoothly break around the front and around the sides. Now, at the rear, if possible, you want it to taper down and just to a point, a gradual taper, and there's a specific angle related to that's ideal, but it's not practical for a normal vehicle. So what you want to do is have the air exit the vehicle without going around a round corner. Now the back of the car looks very rounded, and it is to a degree, but there is a sharp edge that follows around the back, and that's important because when air comes across, you want it to skip off the car, to kind of go and skip rather than curving, because if it wraps around, it will begin swirling, and you have swirling eddies behind the car. That creates a massive vacuum behind the car, and turbulence absorbs energy. So what Tesla has done is put this line. Now first you've got the spoiler on the deck lid. Spoilers, if they tip upward, they give downforce and create drag. When they exit level or nearly level, which is what this one does, they improve aerodynamics and reduce drag. So you want that sharp edge along the back end of the car. The other sharp edge line follows along the taillight, and if you look down, you'll see it's this nice edge. And this body panel here, I've heard criticism that the bumper doesn't match up with the body because it should have a smooth radius, but you've got that sort of kink. Well, that kink effectively allows the air to skip off the body without wanting to curl around and begin to swirl. So that straight edge right there with the kink actually improves the aerodynamics because it allows the air to more effectively detach from the body as it goes rearward. The bumper does have a curve to it. That's less than ideal, but it is what it is. Now, you'll notice at the bottom here, get the camera down there, you've got this same edge. If you look on the side view here, this same edge right there, that lip goes all the way across the back of the car. Now that lip is gives a sharp edge for the air coming off from the bottom to detach from the body cleanly, and you can see the diffuser area there where the air comes along the bottom of the car, curves up nice and smooth, and then is allowed to detach from this sharp edge. So the bulk of the rear of the diameter of the rear of the car is has that sharp aerodynamic detachment edge, for lack of a better term. Other than this area here is curved inward, although honestly the turbulence off the rear wheels may may reduce the effect of the air curving around the bumper. I don't know for sure, but anyway, that edge running along up the sides, the taillights, along the trunk lid, down the other taillight, and then along the bottom edge of the car under the bumper allows the air to detach more smoothly. Those are the primary aerodynamic features of the car. Aside from that, it is the overall height of the car is low. That helps reducing the frontal area. Helps aerodynamics tremendously. But overall, Tesla has done a very, very good job. But the details, these side ports, as well as that duct up underneath the wheel well that ducts air to the windshield, I've never heard that addressed. Other manufacturers use these. I've seen them on BMWs. A lot of supercars have them just as a winglet that's open at the top to smooth air along the front wheels. It is not a common feature, but you're beginning to see it a little bit more. Again, that port up above the wheel well, exiting in front of the windshield, though, that's probably my favorite little hidden detail of this car when it comes to aerodynamics. So anyway, I hope that gives you guys some information that you didn't otherwise know. Sorry for being so wordy and time-consuming in this video, but I wanted to give you guys a general overview of the aerodynamics of the Model 3. I've been teasing about this video for quite some time now, but there's a lot to it. Again, I'm not an expert. If I got some aspect of the car incorrect, please let me know in the comments section below. So anyway, thanks guys. Keep tuning in. I've got some other cool videos coming up in the future. Take it easy.